Welcome to Flag for Discussion, episode 1 for Friday, April 18th. My name is Farbod Markazi. He's Jace Hatfield. Just a quick breakdown on who we are. Jace and I are just basically two college football fans. We love the sport probably a little bit too much. We'll dive into it probably a little bit too much. It affects our personal lives probably a little bit too much. But the, the main point of who we are and what we're doing on this brand new podcast is we're not journalists, we're not insiders, we're not football ops people, we're just fans. So we want to bring you this sport from the perspective and the lens of a fan. Every week we're going to talk about everything about college football, whether it's the games, whether it's and all the changes that's happening, transfer portal, revenue sharing, everything that's coming down. We got kind of blessed with a wonderful first topic for our first episode. I want to give Jace the floor here. Jace, go ahead, jump in here. Welcome to Flag for Discussion. Give a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, excited to get this thing going. Over the last few years, Barbeau and I have gone back and forth sending each other voice memos through text messages. Like he's on the West Coast, I'm here in the Midwest. So just with work schedules didn't always line up, so we would just record these like what turn in from 1 minute to 10-minute long voice memos, thought dumping our college football thoughts to each other. And for a while we talked about let's just put this in a podcast, see what happens, give it a shot, and have some fun while doing it. And so here we are, episode 1 on both of our birthdays. We're filming this Sunday of the Masters, so also a great day in its own right. Letting alone making the first podcast, and you're listening to this on both of our 26th birthdays.
Exactly. So Jace, in general, we came into this very hot. It's a little bit of housekeeping before we get to our first episode. Jace mentioned it. We are recording this about 4 days out. We thought for our first podcast it would be nice. It would be kind of fun and symbolic for ourselves, at least, for it to be released on our birthdays on Friday, April 18th. We're recording this on Sunday of the Masters about 5 days before. But the goal for us and how we're going to shoot it from here on out is we're going to go for release day of or release day after the recording. So we're going to get to that. I think, like I said, Jace, you and I got kind of blessed for our first pod. We did a bunch of rehearsal pods that the topics weren't very sexy. Well, we got a sexy one. Let's get to the mess in Knoxville. For anyone who hasn't read about it right now, up to now, Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback of the Tennessee Volunteers, and basically held out. It was an NFL-style holdout starting Thursday of this past week, and he didn't show up to practice. He was asking for more NIL funding. A little bit of backstory in general. Nico was one of the first major NIL contracts that signed with that, like for recruiting years and years ago. At that point, it was about a 3-year, $8 million reported deal with Tennessee. Apparently, this offseason, Nico went trying to hold Tennessee up against the wall and say, hey, the spring portal opens next week. If you don't give me more than the $2 million that I'm promised, I'm going to transfer out. Lo and behold, Tennessee decided, let's go a different direction. It's kind of a mess all around. So I would just love to hear your point of view, Jace, your reaction. I know you and I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, my initial reaction, I'll start with the decision for Nico holding out. I'm not sure where it started, if this was like a Nico decision with Tennessee, if it was like a agent family camp kind of thing. I don't like the look for Nico short or long term. We had talked about this. I don't think he'll get the money he's asking anywhere. So I think he's in a best case scenario, probably ends up the contract he had at Tennessee is what I'm expecting. And most likely downgrade. You can't, when you enter that spring transfer portal, I think it's key to know you can't enter a school. You can't join a school in your same conference. So the SEC is off limits for him. Not a lot of big name programs outside of the SEC are looking for a quarterback right now. And I don't know how many of those teams are willing to take the risk on. I think it's safe to say Nico's a risk at this point. You don't know how long if he commits to you, even with 4 mil NIL, who's to say he's not going to do this again next year? I don't think a lot of big programs want to take that on, especially given like you look at like non-SEC big programs like Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. They all got a quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see where Nico goes and if he can get that money. I'm not super confident in it, but still got a lot of time.
So you unpacked a lot there. I think it's one of those situations that we saw a lot of people tweet out about it, talk about it. There's a lot of different point of views in general, online, on Twitter. To me, it's just an embarrassment. The fact that there's a lot of different angles you can take it. You can start with the NCAA in general. The NCAA for years and years set up the system. We don't need to go down all that road, but basically made it hard for athletes to ever reap what they provide to the university. So now this has become almost an overcorrection for on the other side. I don't think anyone wanted to get to the NFL style holdouts, but in terms of Nico on its own, I hate the notion of saying like, hey, you should be happy with the money you got, because no, you should always root for growth. You should always try to reap what you can get. Should always ask for what you can get. You and I, we've all been taught that. But with Nico in general, the fact that he held out, the fact that him and his representation or his family thought that they had all the leverage there. I think you and I talked about it a couple days ago. Good for Tennessee. I don't hold any ill will towards Nico. I hope he goes to a major Power 5 program and really blossoms into the potential top 5 pick that we all thought he could be out of high school. As I just look at it as a strictly football take. We're in spring football. That's going to be that just means spring football is the last time these programs, these schools are practicing as a team outside of just normal training camp or some drill, some routes, some just playing catch or in the weight room. Last time these guys are practicing as a team, practicing football in pads until training camp starts up in the fall. So because of that, it's a little messy in my mind, and my camera's jumping again. So I'm going to switch to Jace's camera. But it's just messy in general, because if Nico were to transfer to, let's say, any school in the Big Ten or any school in the Big 12, he would be joining a team that doesn't know him. He doesn't know them. He doesn't know the plays. He doesn't know the coach. He just knows what they were he was offered. And that is poorly thought out from his end of things, and poorly thought out from the other school who would be getting him. I agree with you. I don't think this will end up going swimmingly for Nico. I hope it does, because I think in general, these kids deserve to have every opportunity to grow. With that said, Tennessee was strong in this, and they fought back and they held on tight.
Yeah, I want to give Tennessee credit. And I think we both talked about when Hupel said, like, all right, we're moving on without you. I thought I really liked quick response. I like that he didn't give Nico time. I like that he kind of made his decision. I think that sets a good precedence, obviously at Tennessee, I think, for the kind of culture they're trying to build. But it also sets a good precedence, I think, for college football. If Tennessee immediately just gave in to Nico and gave him the $4 million back, who's to say now every major player, every major recruit isn't going to do the same thing? I liked the precedence that was set there by Tennessee. Also, side note, I have not heard any true confirmations, but I hope that Dan Lanning did make that call.
Yeah.
To Hugh. I have no idea if it's or not. There are like people that say, "Oh, sources have said this happened." Someone, I can't remember who it was. I saw someone ask Dan Lanning directly, and his response was, "I'm only talking about going on at Oregon football." Generic coach answer, gives you nothing. But I hope that phone call is true too. That's just a good little tidbit to the story.
what Jace is talking about there is reportedly Dan Lanning reached out. Dan Lanning and Lincoln Riley, as the reports have said, were reached out by the Iamaleava family and saying, "Hey, you can get us this amount of money. We're happy to transfer to you," or at least using that money to as leverage over USC. We don't know what other schools they also went to, but these at least are the two that were somewhat reported. And supposedly Dan Lanning went to Josh Heupel, the head coach of Tennessee, and said, "Hey, this is going on. Check it out." I almost wonder. I actually no. I want to go back once again. Sorry, I got a little long-winded before I finished talking earlier, but on a football sense, if you're bringing in a quarterback, let's say you're Team X, you just finished spring ball, and you don't have you just realize, hey, my quarterback A, quarterback 1, quarterback 2, quarterback 3, they're good, but I don't know if that's enough to get us over the hump in the conference or get us to where we need to be. Nico can't transfer, like you mentioned, to other SEC schools. It's an SEC rule that after the winter cycle, SEC can't transfer to SEC. So that means he's going to the Big 12, the Big 10, or the Pac 12, or the ACC. For some reason, I forgot about the ACC. All that's fine and well.
So that's the committee.
Yeah, there's plenty of schools in those regions that can attract him, but I can't imagine. I just think of how college football used to be a vessel for professional growth. Just like how we saw college as we're going to go get education, get our degree, take on internships, take on networking opportunities, and hopefully we have a professional career on the other end of things. College football used to be 100%. Hey, if you come to here, if you come to play for Coach Saban, you're going to develop, and if you keep working hard, maybe you'll be a first-round pick or an NFL player by the end of it. I see this as a detriment to Nico's NFL chances. Now, he has all the talent in the world, and last year he was a little up and down, but I don't think anyone doubts that he has the arm talent, he has the mobility, and he has the ability to be everything that he's supposed to be. It's almost a little just concerning for me, thinking how much he could be stunting his growth, leaving a really good coach in Josh Heupel over a little bit of a raise in college where the real payday is still the NFL. Now, I don't want to come off as that get off my lawn old man thing. I love a lot of the changes that are happening in college football, but in general, I think some people, it's clear when they've lost the plot, and maximizing everything you can make in college is important, but stunting your growth in college is going to be detrimental, and I feel like you might regret it down the road.
Yeah, his path at Tennessee seemed pretty straightforward. I mean, you're already the starter. One, okay, go get Tennessee 2 more years. Maybe by the end of your 3rd year, you're a first-round draft pick. If you need the 4th year, you can go back and do it. I mean, Tennessee, they play off his freshman year. You would assume he'd probably going to be his worst year in terms of his output and talent. I mean, I don't see why they couldn't have just kept repeating playoff appearances. Maybe, hopefully win a game or 2 more in the playoff as time goes on. And as you said, Heupel's a great coach. I mean, there's 3 quarterbacks in the NFL from Tennessee, not all Heupel products, but there are good Tennessee quarterbacks in the NFL. Nico, like you were saying, the paydays in the NFL, if you be a top draft pick and then get to that second contract, especially as a quarterback, that's when you're talking over $100 million contracts. Sure, he might make an extra $1 million in college now, but as I already mentioned, I don't think he's going to get the payday he's looking for. But let's say even if he does, he might be sacrificing $150 million down the road for 3 or 4 now, more than he would have had. And he was already making millions too, which is, like you said, we should always strive for more money, and you should always feel like you're getting paid what you deserve. But sometimes, maybe sometimes it's good to be grateful for what you have versus just always trying to find what else you can get.
I don't want this to come off as like a Nico hit job, but
Fair.
it because I'm sure the kid's a great kid, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of people outside of just his parents in his head telling him to do different things, like giving him advice, whether it's the right advice, wrong advice. We don't know if all of this has come from Nico, or if it's like his representation saying, "Hey, right now would be a good time to hold Tennessee," or like hostage, basically trying to make sure you can get some money. I think what you said is absolutely correct, though. The fact that Tennessee held their ground and Heupel basically said, "You miss practice, you can hold out, but you miss practice, you're gone. You're not part of our team." That I like a lot. I think we've seen a couple coaches in the last day or so come out. Mario Cristobal in Miami basically said, if you're going to play holdout, you're going to play get out. And you and I respect Mario a lot, and that is exactly what Mario would say. If you're going to play holdout, you're going to play get out. And but the problem I think for me is programs that have the NIL funding but don't have the team fully built up, unlike Tennessee, who has a very good roster. They might cave into this because, like you said, like if this went the other way, it would be a sign to every college quarterback, every major college player in the country: hold out, try to get more money, and if you can't, go transfer somewhere else. Now, I think if you were like a wide receiver or if you were a running back, where a lot of those positions, like yes, you have to go and learn a new playbook, you have to go learn new routes, and you have to go develop chemistry with the quarterback, chemistry with the offensive coordinator. But a lot of those positions are plug and play. But when you're a quarterback transferring to, I don't want to come up with something, but let's say Nico transfers to UCLA. Well, he has to learn. UCLA already has a new offensive coordinator this year, so all those kids have to learn that system. He has to learn Big Ten football in general. He has to learn Deshaun Foster's coaching style. He has to learn the playbook. He has to learn. He has to get along with his teammates. It's just gonna be tough in my mind, and I think it stunts the growth. That's my biggest worry about it. It just stunts the growth, and that's what makes it feel icky for me. Sorry, I know you were about to speak. I don't care as much about guys holding in and out, and I know that might be controversial. Like it is, that part is icky, but I hate it when people who have this opportunity and this God-given talent are either led astray by other people or make decisions that stunt their own growth. And
Yeah.
it's just that part I don't like. Like Nico, we were talking about Nico as a number 1 overall pick next year, and he could still be, and I hope he is. To me, it just feels off.
Yeah, the path that wherever he goes is just going to be harder than it would have been had he stayed at Tennessee. And a last note I'll make, I guess, on Nico, and we can maybe talk more about the implications for Tennessee.
For sure.
But I think to kind of further that icky feeling you have, it's always a hard pill to swallow when someone like a young athlete actually makes a decision that you feel like is not the best for that athlete and not the best for the program. Because then it's like, all right, why is this decision being made if nobody's really winning? And then you start getting nervous, like, man, you start doing the math on Nico's move here, and you're like, the only people that really seem to benefit are the agents / people in Nico's immediate life who just get a cut of his paychecks. Because it, like I said, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Nico. You're most likely going to downgrade your university in your situation. You're going to have to. You're putting a lot of work on your plate to learn a new offense, learn new teammates. You're going to be at a worse program, so you're going to have to fight a little bit more of an uphill battle. Tennessee's situation, obviously, like losing starting quarterback very late into the process of preparing for the next season, also never an ideal scenario. So it feels like a lose. Wondering why was this decision made, and you start to do the math, and unfortunately, like, it's got someone. The agents are winning. The family member maybe who. I've seen reports that family members might have pushed this one way or another. I cannot confirm nor deny that, but those people that go in here, and that really, I always feel like that's a key when these young athletes are getting used, potentially being used by other people, just for a money grab, and you hate that. So in that case, I do feel bad for Nico if that's actually what's going on. Uh, but yeah, I guess only time will tell. Nico hasn't, at this point on Sunday, Nico hasn't come out spoken on really any of this, so we don't have anything to report on in terms of his words. I hope by the time people are listening to this on Friday, maybe Nico's spoke on it a little bit more, and some of what we said validated, maybe incorrect, but only time will tell.
I really hope I'm proven to be completely wrong. Like, I really
Yeah,
hope it was.
good point.
It was It was. I don't even want to talk about what it could be, but I really hope that, hey, no, I wasn't holding out. The reports were wrong, but very trusted journalists have talked about it all. So I'm not sure exactly how much of it could be wrong. But like you said, this goes back to the old college football adage that a lot of reporters, a lot of shows, a lot of insiders have talked about over the last 2-3 years since NIL has really become a major talking point. There's a lot of bad actors in sports. A lot of people who just want to make an extra dime. And whether we like it or not, they're always going to be there because that money will always be there. So whether people want to discuss networks in general, who networks often have issues. Oh, there's my camera again. Wonderful. Networks often have issues with what they're talking about, with what they're discussing. Or there's agents and there's wannabe agents. You and I worked in as interns in a football ops department, and we talked a lot about how there's a lot of agents out there that are wannabes. They don't have clients. They just say, hey, I can represent your kid if you let me. And then there's also a lot of like family members of kids who are like, hey, let me be your representative. I have a law degree. And a lot of those kids end up getting taken advantage of or given the wrong advice. And I really just hope this is it, when Nico looks back at this in 10 years, this is what he wanted to do.
Yeah,
I think.
I'm going to jump topics to implications for Tennessee, but I want to point to what you said. When Farbo and I were doing the football ops internship he's talking about, it was really shocking how many bad actors actually are, especially agent-wise. I think I was, I'm sure agents are a little scummy, and, that happens every now and then. It was the amount of athletes that are constantly being berated to be taken advantage of was actually like pretty disgusting. And I hadn't been up to it. We started doing people gave us those presentations, and you start like working with agents and or like doing a lot more research into it, and you start to realize, man, it's so easy for these kids to get scammed out of by agents. And then I'm sure it's even harder when you have a family member who you thought you trusted, and maybe you still do trust, and that they're part of that process, which is we saw family members turn on them also pretty quickly once the money starts to be realized. So it's a tough spot for them. But I want to jump into the implications for Tennessee. What does this mean for their 2025 season? Part of the irony of Dan Lanning potentially being the one to call Josh and let him know, hey, your quarterback is shopping his name around. Oregon's got a fun QB battle. QB battle, maybe more or less. It seems like it's going to be Dante Moore. But there's Austin Novosad, who was a very talented four-star kid, been in the Oregon system for a couple of years now. If he doesn't win that role, he has never confirmed that he would be entering the portal if he didn't win that job. That could very well be a real thing for him. And with Tennessee's job potentially opening up, they've said that they might go with the redshirt freshman Melendrick. Am I butchering that name? They only have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, though. So, that could be a scenario where an Oregon quarterback loses that job, jumps in the portal, and could be a Tennessee QB. So that'll be something to watch if you're Tennessee. See what happens with that Oregon QB battle between Novosad and Dante Moore. Ohio State also has a pretty big QB battle. That's also another, whoever ends up on the wrong side of Ohio State could also end up in a Tennessee jersey. So Tennessee, I don't think all hope is lost. There's going to be a couple of good teams with QB battles. Michigan's going to have one. So there could be good names in the portal. I don't know a whole lot about. I was doing some research on Tennessee's two quarterbacks. They're both ranked similarly as recruits, into the mid 100s to mid 200s, both 4 stars, both in that like 12, 13, 14 ranked of quarterbacks for their class. I have not seen any of their film. I have not seen them play on the field at all. I know their spring game was yesterday, and both of them were the only two QBs playing for each of their respective teams. So, that'll be an interesting QB battle too, to see what Tennessee decides to go with.
Going back to what I said earlier in terms of if you are a wide receiver or if you are a running back or corner or a position that, like, yes, you have to learn the playbook, but it's much more of a plug and play position. I think you can transfer in the spring and be very successful the next year. I think Tennessee, it's really tough because you want to be set at that position, especially in the SEC. It's really easy to lose momentum, no matter how highly people think of Tennessee. I think a lot of people are going to be rooting for Tennessee for taking the stand this year. With that said, it might be stupid. People might hate it, but if your year starts out, hey, right before a spring game, our QB1 transferred out. Our QB1 held out. We basically cut him. He transferred out. We didn't go after a quarterback, and then we went 5-7 because we didn't have a quarterback. We had an awesome roster. Momentum can be lost very quickly in college football, in every sport, but in a sport that relies on you convincing 17, 18, 19-year-olds to come to your program. It's not as much NFL-based contracts. It's not drafting. It's, hey, this is why we're Tennessee. This is why we're going to win with you. This is why this is how recruiting works. And I don't expect them to falter too much, but momentum can be lost very quickly. So I think if there's anyone out there who can judge a QB battle, it's Josh Heupel. He's excellent offensive coach. And he also probably believes the same. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's going to be really hard after spring ball to bring in a quarterback. It's just too much to learn without any on-field practice. And like you said, there are a number of quarterback battles that we can keep an eye on, whether it's at Oregon with Moore and Novosad, whether it's at Ohio State with any of those 2 or 3 stars that they have there.
Yeah, it was like St. Clair and Julian Sand.
Yeah,
I think.
Realistically, I almost wonder if there's 2 different ways you can go. You can either force the issue, and you can go, all right, we got to go get a quarterback. We got to be good. We can't lose momentum. Our year can't go in the way that it's gone so far. We have to right the ship. Or you can say, no, screw that. We're Tennessee. We're going to play it the way we want to play it. And we have the quarterbacks. While we might go through growing pains, we still have the quarterbacks to fight through it and compete game after game. There's just 2 different ways that you can realistically do it. I don't know exactly what they should do, but I almost would advocate for not going out and getting a quarterback.
Yeah, I've sometimes, for the sake of just bodies and having enough like people in the QB room, they might go get one just because now you're left with 2. One being a true friend who enrolled early, also, so he's 17. Just for the sake of like, we got to make sure we just have enough legs to put, and backfield. They might just go get one. No idea how high or low profile that might be. But I mean, both these, just based off of like the fact that they were recruits, I'm sure Tennessee could just stick with one of them and have a decent enough season. We were looking at their schedule earlier. They got Syracuse. So no slouch. But, I think Tennessee's roster should be good enough with or without a quarterback to that football game. Then you get ETSU. Again, that even more so, that should be a very winnable game no matter who you're trying out there at QB. And then they have in Knoxville. at Neyland. So that's the September 13th. Like, circle the calendar if you're Tennessee. Like, we have to have our QB figured out at least to some degree by that date. Whoever it's going to be, whatever style of play we're going to rock with. That you need a definitive game plan by week 3, which is unfortunate. When I was looking at their schedule, when I was pulling it up, I was hoping to see, like the first 6 or 7 weeks be a little bit easier, just because you may kind of pulling for Tennessee now. I really respect how they've handled everything. So I was a little disheartened to see that Georgia week 3 game. Yeah, we've seen what Georgia can do to teams who are ill prepared at the quarterback position. Sorry, Clemson. Sorry, Florida State. They're just one of those teams that can roll. So I hope Tennessee kind of finds it. I do think, kind of to your momentum point, not to ramble too much here, but I actually like the culture set that this brings to the team. I think when you even yes, it's a big player, but when you kind of tell a big player, like, get out of here, you're being a little bit too dramatic for us. You're causing too many eyes. We just don't want to deal with this. You're asking for too much money. I actually think that sets a really good culture, like, internally as a team. There's a lot of kids at Tennessee who probably really liked Nico and maybe are a little bit disheartened to see him leave. But I'm sure there were kids on the team who did appreciate the holdout, probably didn't appreciate the things he was trying with NIL. So I think it sets a good precedence. I think that builds good momentum. I think that that's something that can bring a team together, especially as you mentioned, like in very end of spring practice. Like you're running out of time with pads. You're running out of time with that. So it's a good chance to build momentum heading into summer. That way these kids can kind of carry that momentum on their own. And then when you meet back up for fall camp, you hit the ground running, and maybe they have a new quarterback. Maybe it's one of the kids in the room. But I'm sure Tennessee will set themselves up so it doesn't really matter who's at QB.
I think what you said is actually the absolute truth but also the contrary to my momentum piece was the power of everyone against us in the world, and what that does to a team. Obviously, if you're not an extremely talented team, there's only so much that can take, only so far that can take you. But we've always talked about how one of Kirby Smart's superpowers is he can have the best team we've ever seen roster-wise, talent-wise. But after they win, they say no one believed in us. It's because they convinced those kids that, hey, they're talking all this crap about you. You're not projected to be a All-American. You're not predicted to be. You were left off this preseason list. And that chip on the shoulder that gives them, I think, another example, no matter what people thought about that team, but the Michigan team 2 years ago under Harbaugh, they felt wronged. They felt like they were being attacked, and they felt like it was us against the world, and Michigan versus everybody, as they had. So the power that meeting probably had on Friday or Saturday when Heupel told the team, hey, this program's not bigger than Nico's not bigger than the program. This program is bigger than everyone here, including myself. That's why if he wanted more money, I decided he's not a Tennessee Volunteer. And I think that is powerful, and it brings the team together. I'm going to, for the sake of us rambling even more, I'm going to move us on to the next topic. Jace, I think we're going to move from Tennessee out to where I am, the West Coast. Let's talk a little bit about USC recruiting. Folks that don't know, in the past, we have it. Before we started recording this first podcast, we've done a number of practice podcasts, and you and I kept saying as they were building this recruiting class, let's wait and see. Well, today they're sitting number 1 on 24/7. I'm going to read so I don't get any of this wrong. Number 1 on 24/7, number 2 on On3. For those that don't know, 24/7 and On3 slightly measure their rankings slightly different. 24/7 is a cumulative approach. On3 is an average per recruit approach. Anyways, so they're number 1 on 24/7, number 2 on 3. Then they have 22 commits already. They're sitting at 91.83 per on 3, 90.06 on 3, 91.83 24/7. Sorry, said a lot of words so far. I guess, Jace, my main question for you is, I think we're past the point of wait and see. Give me your take on their future. Give me your take on this class. Is wait and see over?
Super impressive class. The 22 commits. by it's not in May yet. 22 commits, 20 class. Obviously, as we saw last year, a lot of movement among kids. Like in that, as the season went on, that like August to December, phase, a lot of kids were shifting around. This is incredibly impressive, and I think even if 10 of these kids leave, I think it's still for real. You don't put together a class like this just by luck. Like no school is just doing this luck, to get lucky and stuff. So I think it is legit. And a lot of this talent is from Southern California. They've struggled, to recruit some of the best out of Southern California the last few years. So it's good. If you're it's good to see you start to take those big name 4 stars, 5 stars out of SoCal rather than those kids going to Oregon and Washington or over to the coast. So I think that part's for real. I do think a lot of it is going to hinge on the USC season. As we know, they're flush with money. They're flush with history. They're flush with fans. They're a big brand, big name, and that's just probably not going to go away. They really lived up to that hype the last few years in terms of just win, losses, and output. So I think they've done a really good job setting themselves up for this 26 season, or for the 2026 class. But this 2025 season is probably going to completely make or break what ends up going on with this class. If see into December, National Signing Day, and they're 6-6, you're probably going to see more than half of these kids gone. But if they come in 10-2 and they make for themselves in the Big Ten, this number 1 class might even be stronger at that point in time. So I think they've done everything to set themselves up. Now it's just time for them to win games, which would be interesting to see. I know they've got a few tough games in the calendar, but they did dodge a lot of big bullets in the Big Ten. Which is pretty nice. Yeah, here we go. That at Oregon game is going to be really fun. I would love to see how many recruits, when that game happens, you got to pull how many recruits are at this, how many of them are between USC and Oregon, how many of them are from California. That game will be probably the biggest game on the West Coast, I would say, probably for this season.
I don't have any disagreements with you. I think I'll get to that. That game definitely on the West Coast. That game is going to be, if USC season goes the way we do, I think you and I have talked about Oregon's schedule. They really only have one potential hiccup going to Penn State week 5. If Dante Moore or Austin Novosad, whoever the quarterback is, we assume is Dante Moore, ends up being legit, we expect Oregon to be either undefeated or have 1 loss heading into that USC game on the 22nd of November. So it really depends on how USC is. And I love their week 2 game against Clay Helton. See how if Clay Helton has a chip on his shoulder. In general, a lot of people like to say a lot of different things about SC. They're done. They're the Nebraska of the West. They can't ever recapture what they had. I, as a fan of a team that's rivals of USC, I would love for that to be true. But I think you and I both know that if they just needed the right people in power, in touch, in charge of recruiting, in charge of NIL, they needed to have more cohesiveness amongst their donors, amongst the people who run their NIL. And for what it's worth, USC has done a lot of the things that they should have done years ago this year. And look at that. It's working. Mm-hmm. They brought in Chad Bowden, I think that's his name, from Notre Dame, who's the general manager of Notre Dame. And I don't think anyone can doubt how much that has helped. Having USC, that brand, that recruiting, the infrastructure that they can have with having all the LA donors, they should be one of the powerhouses every year, realistically. And we don't dislike anything about Lincoln Riley, the offensive coach, or Lincoln Riley, even the head coach. I think most people think he has his head on straight pretty good. I think the only issue with it's like, why are we doing this in year 3? Like how far behind has USC fallen? Like you said, they in general have. I'll go back to the schedule in a second. They in general have very. What's it called? My bad. They have a very strong class right now. They've really developed everything that they need to get to where they are. With that said, their class is hinging on how their season play goes out this year. Like you said, if they go 5-7, 6-6, I'm not of the belief that most of those guys decommit. But now in a world where revenue sharing might be a thing and everyone can offer the same thing to those kids, let's say Oregon goes 11-1. Let's say Ohio State goes 12-0. Let's say UCLA has a strong breakout season. You're saying a lot of these kids are from Southern California. Let's say UCLA has 8 wins, and they're like, we just need you to get over the hump. It wouldn't shock me if that ends up being like a deal breaker for at least 5 kids. I don't think you're going to lose 10 kids of a class, especially kids that were committed this early. It's a little risky, but it's very impressive. That's my thing. I'm no longer doubting.
Very impressive.
I'm no longer doubting it in general.
Yeah. USC in that position where they're one great season away from just being quote unquote back, right? Like one great season away from being that house they were when we were little kids. But they're on the flip side, which is good for them. They're like still 4 terrible seasons away from like becoming nothing. I don't even think that could happen. To your point too, I don't think they would lose too many. The class it's backloaded with a lot of 3 stars from Southern California too. So I think those kids will probably stick no matter what. But as you mentioned, like the Ryder Lyons, the Jonas Williams of that class. They're going to be looking around for quarterbacks, and if you get Ryder Lyons, I'm sure Jonas Williams will jump. You don't get Ryder, Jonas probably stays regardless of your season output. But USC will have an interesting season this year, and we both talk about Lincoln Riley when we talk about like there's the Lincoln Riley, Dan Lanning, Mario Cristobal, Sonny Dykes, like class of coaches, those coaches that are going into year 4 this year. Sonny Dykes has made and won a playoff game and been to a national championship. Dan Lanning has made the playoff, not won a playoff game, but won big games. And Mario Cristobal yet to make a playoff, but also has won big games, and they've competed for ACC championships and that sort of thing. Lincoln Riley is just the one coach of that class that still is kind of yet to figure it out. This kind of like he is figuring it out. He was always a really good X's and O's offensive coach. We saw that at Oklahoma. We saw it with Caleb Williams. He's starting to get the recruiting side down, which is pretty scary. He's been putting up good numbers, like with Caleb Williams. And they didn't have a lot of talent outside of Caleb, but I don't think people always realize that. Like he had a subpar O line. He had wide receivers that were kind of a wide receiver room that was always in flux. So Lincoln Riley knows what to do. He's gone 7-5 with lesser talent. As you said, as fans of somebody who directly competes with USC, I'm a little nervous, and I think a good sign for USC when your rivals are, maybe that didn't take you as seriously for the last few years, are starting to like perk up when they hear your name, and so if you're USC, that's a good sign, like what they're building. But I do think they need to prove it on the field this year. If he's going to keep being compared to Dan Lanning, Sonny Dykes, Mario Cristobal, he needs to start winning games to finally kind of break into that echelon that I think those 3 are starting to go towards.
I think I completely agree. I think in general, at first when you said Sonny Dykes, my head went like, whoa, what? But you're right. This guy's made it to the national championship game. Lincoln has made it to the playoff, so you could argue, not with USC, but with Oklahoma, you could argue that he has the same resume, just more longevity. He has coached more games than Dan Lanning. So they are probably in that class. I, in general, choose not to doubt him offensively because I think any Lincoln Riley offense can score 50 at any time. Like I said earlier, it just depends on the infrastructure that's around him. If Lincoln Riley he would never tell you this, but if he probably had it his way, there would be no one around him. He would be doing traditional college football, recruiting the way he wants to, maybe going into the portal a little bit. But now there's so many cooks in the kitchen. To me, like you said, it definitely it should make other fan bases nervous. This class is legit by USC. I think I don't want that to get lost here. And we're gonna get into the next topic in a second, but I don't want that to get lost here. This class is legit. It's no matter what we're talking about USC. if Oregon, Ohio State, Washington, Penn State, Michigan don't start paying attention, USC is gonna start putting a fence around Southern California again. Now there's so many recruits in Southern California that
Yeah.
every one of those programs will end up still getting their guys. But with that said, how it used to be under Pete Carroll was USC picked the guys they wanted, and then Oregon and the rest of those programs got basically not USC rejects, but the guys that like USC's plan Bs. And I recognize that a lot of the programs that USC is competing with are in a different spot than they were 20 years ago. But it's not that we talked about with Tennessee. It's not that hard to lose momentum all of a sudden, or at least to be stagnated in where you are, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, USC is the new sexy thing. So I'm really interested in what this means for all of college football, because the argument for the last 3 years against realignment, against realignment in general, was we don't need, or against the college football playoff expansion, it was like we don't need to expand the playoff to get more teams in. We need the Florida schools and the California schools to put a fence around their product. So Alabama, LSU, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia don't go out and take all the best kids from those schools' backyards. If Florida held on to one or two more stars from the state of Florida, if USC held on to 1 to 3 more stars from the state of California, it's all of a sudden going to make them better and Alabama weaker or Oregon weaker. So I think everyone in the country in general should be a tiny bit nervous at least. I, I do you want to go over the USC schedule real quick? Like, give me a number that they should hit to potentially keep all the guys, or make you feel like they're legit.
Yeah, let's pull it up here real quick just for fun, and then we
Yeah.
can move forward. All right. Let's see. They should 4-0. Safe to say. Have a lot of Purdue friends that I have nothing but love for, but I'm sorry. I think USC might get you there. Michigan State has a lot of friend and family ties. Love all of you, but I think USC might get you there. That at Illinois game will be interesting.
That's gonna
I'm
be
here in
scary.
Chicago, so that's not could be a fun game to go to. That'll be a great game. That Illinois is a very solid team. They return Galtmeyer. That'll be fun. Like UC West Coast brand. I doubt they've come to at Illinois and played in Champaign and ever, maybe quite a long time at least. Fun game. That's a tough stretch. Then you play Michigan. At least that's at home for them. But Michigan is never going to be a slouch. At Notre Dame, it's going to be a very tough game. At Nebraska, even they have a sneaky tough stretch there. Even at Nebraska
Yeah.
isn't going to be the easiest game. They get a bye before that one, but baby Mahomes turns into the real deal. We'll see. Northwestern, all the love for Northwestern. That should be a win for USC. Iowa, I don't know a lot about Iowa this year. USC, I think you could probably say a home game for USC. They should win that game. At Oregon, I'm sure that's the USC. There are probably 2 or 3 circle games for them. As I meant, we already talked about that. That recruiting game is going to be, yeah, definitely. I don't know if they'll want to hit it, but definitely is. That game will be a massive. I can't. That biggest West Coast recruiting game of the season.
Yeah.
We'll pull the numbers and we find out who's going to be at that game. That's going to be awesome. Then you got your classic crosstown rivalry there to end the season. If they can pull off 8 wins, I think that would be a very solid year for them. Definitely enough to keep up the momentum they have. I think 7 and less kind of starts to nervous. Like 7-5 doesn't sound great. 8-4 sounds meh.
If I
What do you think? What do you see here?
This is a schedule they could go 10-3, 10-2 on, but this is also a schedule that they can all of a sudden go 5-7 on. I think, like you said, I don't want to go for our audio listeners. We have the graphic up, so that's what Jace was going off of. For people watching on YouTube, you've obviously seen it, but so we have Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. We'll call those wins. We'll chalk those up as wins. I'll give them the win on Illinois too. I think in general, how I've seen it, and this is very not nuanced, and this is not football breaking down, but it's just my opinion when I saw Oregon, USC, and some of the Pac-12 schools in the Big Ten last year is they could punch you in the mouth, but eventually just the pace at which the Pac-12 schools can score at compared to some of these traditional Big Ten schools will just outpace them. So, like you said, I don't know a ton about Iowa this year, but I think I would assume over a 4-quarter game, USC will outpace them. So I would, if you want to give them 5-0 through Illinois, then Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska would be tough, 5-3. Then I would say they can go 3-1 and finish 8-4 and finish in or 9-3 and finish in a very strong spot. They're a good team. They're not a great team. They have pieces. They don't have a lot. Their offensive line's still a little weak. They just lost another offensive lineman to Oregon. They have, though, the defensive game plan the defensive staff and some pieces now that are hopefully developed to really compete the way they want to. We need to move on, but we can't go 20 minutes in a USC segment and not talk about Jada Iamaleava. It really just depends on who the quarterback is. There were talks about Nico potentially going there, but I think those talks have kind of been shot down and debunked since. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe by the time this episode is released, Nico is their quarterback. But we'll have to see how Jada Iamaleava pans out. Like I said, that schedule is one that could lead them 6 losses because they're still not serious, or it could give them a really strong season where they compete for the playoff.
Yeah, they'll be a fun team.
Exactly. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up with a game. I don't think we'll go with a different topic afterwards, but
that's good.
This was something I texted Jace about, a little inside baseball. I texted Jace about like last week or 2 weeks ago. I have a long commute. I have one of those sometimes driving light bulb moments. So for me, my brain sometimes in those commutes decides to work. And I just randomly started thinking, what if the NFL disappeared tomorrow? And I'm not saying like all the players and the coaches disappeared, but let's say tomorrow morning we just get a report the NFL will not play its 2025 season, and every college football team will get to bring back one alumni quarterback. 2 rules. Let's talk about it has to be an alumni quarterback. Alabama cannot go get Patrick Mahomes. And then it has to be an active NFL player. So Michigan, while they theoretically, because he's an alumni, but he can't go and get Tom Brady because he's not active in the NFL today. I think, Jace, I need you to humor me a little bit. You made a top 10. I asked you to do that. But let's just go over this thought experiment a little bit. Let's just go break down some teams. Let's start with Bama. I think
that was the first team I started trying to when you messaged me this prompt.
They're a really fun
first team.
They're a really fun thought experiment. Do they bring back one quick point? Everything else about the college team stays the same. That roster stays the same. They can't bring back any alumni. You can't bring in any NFL coach. So Kalen DeBoer will be the coach of Alabama under either Mac Jones, Tua, or depends on if you want to consider Jalen Hurts in that, or if he's an Oklahoma guy for you, or Bryce Young.
Yeah, or Bryce Young. Alabama was a fun one. I was trying to think of, okay, Kalen DeBoer probably going to love Tua Bryce, the lefty gunslinging kind of style quarterbacks. That's at least for Tua, that's like right up that Kalen DeBoer alley. I don't want just the Tua would have been kind of fun, just for the idea of him kind of getting that back. But in terms of talent, I feel like I had to go Jalen Hurts. If we're counting that for Alabama, that was the back I gave them. I did not go with Jalen Hurts for Oklahoma, so I wasn't letting myself like double down. I just thought he was kind of the head and shoulders better quarterback than those Bama guys. Where at Oklahoma, I was like, okay, I'll give Hurts to Bama there. But I like Bama with Hurts a lot. I think Jalen Hurts fits Kalen DeBoer's play. He'd probably run a little bit less, which I don't think he'd be mad about. And a big thing about when I was going through this is like, who would be the best teams? I love veteran NFL quarterbacks. I think veteran NFL QBs are just so smart that no collegiate defense is going to be able to tear down like an NFL vet QB. So I went Hurts with Bama, but that was a fun one. I was trying to think. I was trying to match up that Kalen DeBoer play style. I was like, man, he might love Tua, but going with Jalen Hurts for that one.
Sorry, my mic was muted. This is going to be a problem if I forget to unmute it. I agree with you. I actually hadn't thought about bringing a lefty back to Kalen with Tua, but I think Jalen in general, he's the point guard. He can handle everything he wants to. That team would be scary. I think one thing that made this thought experiment fun for me was a team like LSU. They're a really great roster. They bring in Joe Burrow, who's obviously, we know what the 2019 LSU season was. It was unbelievable, probably one of the best teams ever. I hope you don't hear the sirens behind me. But we saw LSU have a Heisman winner last year, and they went 9-3. So they wasted Jaden Daniels. Their defense is surely better. Their defensive staff is surely better than it was with Jaden. But where would LSU be with Joe Burrow?
I've got them. So I'll say in my top 10, I had them at 7, more due to the upbringing of Burrow than to the complement of what I think LSU is as a football team. Not knocking on them, but I think Burrow's the reason why I had them up there. That one of those. If I'm LSU, if I'm in that football facility and Joe Burrow comes in a quarterback for us, I'm asking Joe Burrow, you're calling our plays. Get Brian Kelly. He's not call. He has nothing to say to the offense. Joe, bring your NFL offense, and we're going to run what you think. I would Joe Burrow more than I think Brian Kelly, if anything, would probably hold back the Joe Burrow team. But he's never really had a quarterback like Joe Burrow, especially current form. NFL quote unquote veteran
that would
Joe
just
Burrow,
make the
but
post-game loss press conference even more legendary from Brian. like him slamming the table.
Gosh.
And he's like, I don't know why this keeps happening. I agree. I
go 9-3 somehow.
That's what I'm thinking.
That'd be my take.
I think LSU at that point could be the best team, or they could go 9-3 just because. I don't know. Like I said, we just saw them have a Heisman-winning quarterback who they wasted a season with Jaden Daniels. Then the next option, I think that we want to point out before we get into your top 10, is talk to me about teams. Would teams want to keep their current guy? Like, for me, Texas. Would they, while we haven't seen Arch Manning, would they want to keep their current guy instead of go to the NFL?
So I had them running with Arch. If you would count I don't even know if they would take him. So there was a couple of schools I was thinking about that with. Penn State was another one. Like, I don't know if you consider some of the backup, like, quote unquote, free agents active or not, but Penn State was a team I figured would probably go with Drew Allers. Notre Dame was an interesting one too. I was like that they might just choose to roll with Riley Leonard, who's technically not an NFL QB, but I guess he's about to be here in 2 weeks or when the draft is. So I feel like at Notre Dame was a team I was like they might just roll with the guy they just had last year, who's gonna, even though he fell, I think he might be their best choice. Penn State I think would just stick with Drew Allers. Texas I think would stick with Arch. I also think those teams just comparatively take a big hit because I think when we get into the top 10, those top 4 teams are just disgusting. I think they roll everybody, right. And then it kind of drops down from there.
So let's start with your honorable mentions. I see you have a couple of those. I
like that.
Will say I disagree with one of them pretty wholeheartedly, but that's what makes this fun because it's La La Land and we'll never see it actually play out.
It'd be awesome to watch happen.
Exactly. So let's start with your honorable mentions and go into maybe 8 to 10.
All right, like that. My favorite honorable mention that I had was Iowa State with Brock Purdy. Underrated roster. Matt Campbell, phenomenal coach. I think he's an underrated coach. I think Brock Purdy's very good quarterback. I think he would take Iowa State to that top 12 area. Respect. I don't think they would jump much further than that. I think just the roster as a whole isn't quite good enough to beat some of the teams we'll talk about in the top 10. Clemson with Trevor Lawrence was an honorable mention. I'm leaning towards putting that one in the top 10. That was one that I actually had in the top 10 and backed out of just because of Trevor Lawrence. He's played the last year or two. It hasn't been. It wasn't the same Trevor Lawrence that we like dreamt about in college, and it was so fun watching him. He's killing it. I feel like he's lost some of that mojo, so maybe I would just recency bias had them as an honorable mention. A fun one I had was Cal. If you're Cal, you're rolling with Goff or Rodgers. I actually think both of them would be really good in this scenario. Just as I mentioned, I think the NFL mind that both of those guys have is advanced for college football that they would be able to tear apart any defense. That was also an interesting one because that's probably the worst roster I have on any of this list. I just think their quarterback could elevate them enough to be an honorable mention. I'll also throw out Wisconsin with Russell Wilson. That was a fun one. I thought Wisconsin last year was a decent team. Horrid quarterback play. Granted, they lost. You lose your starter in the fifth quarter of the season or whatever. That was a team I thought put together a decent 5-7 year, almost beat Oregon with really bad quarterback play, like basically you and me out there. So I was like, Russell Wilson could really probably take that to the next level. Again, NFL mind. I like that. I like Luke pairing. That would be that would be a very interesting dynamic between Fickle and Ross, but that was a team I thought was fun. I have Notre Dame with Riley Leonard, Sam Hartman on there. I did not have Texas in my top 10, which is probably a hot take, but I think Arch Manning probably holds them back just because they don't have an NFL guy.
I think it's interesting that you don't have Notre Dame in there, but that's not the one I disagree with, just because we saw Notre Dame just in the national championship. And I know those were college quarterbacks, but the rest of the team is still stacked. And in general, Notre Dame is not the type of team that relies on their quarterback to win football games. Reacting to Cal, man, you want Rodgers' football mind. I don't know. I think we've seen the last 3 years he doesn't really play well with young guys, and
give me Goff.
Yeah. You're the Lions fan. You can just become a pseudo Cal fan too and take Jared Goff. The one I disagree with is one team that we have talked about in the past. This is Dabo Swinney's best shot to win a national championship. I'm not saying that they have a national championship roster this year, but their roster is very good, very senior laden, and they have Cade Klubnik, who's a good college quarterback. But you're going to bring in, forget what he's done in the NFL. You're going to bring in a great college quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. One of the best.
That's true. You're
careers, right. One of the best college careers in general we've ever seen from a quarterback is Trevor Lawrence. I think I said Caleb Williams earlier. My bad. Trevor Lawrence, one of the best college careers we've ever seen. You're going to bring him in and to run that Clemson team, who, at that point,
that's a good point.
I don't know, man. I would say they're extremely scary. I think I'm gonna read off your 9 and 10.
Yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say Clemson probably is better than both teams. Just for the fun, I really wanted to throw these 9 and 10 in there.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're really intriguing, and we're gonna. Actually, let's go 7, 8, 9, 10 so we can speed it up a little bit. So why don't you read that off?
Yeah, so at 7, I have LSU with Burrow. Kind of what we touched on earlier. I think Joe Burrow would just be phenomenal. I think he would torch college defenses. LSU's roster, I don't think it excites me enough, especially, again, when you hear the top. Tennessee with Josh Dobbs was a sneaky one that I had in honorable mentions. I ended up bringing up.
NASA guy.
The astronaut. Tennessee, as we talked about earlier in the show, really good roster. Very good roster construction. I know we're both fans. We believe in what he's doing at Tennessee. Josh Dobbs, a kind of an NFL veteran. I really like the NFL veteran, as you'll notice. Like I love how much they develop as football players. I think that was a team that like Nico, a lot of talent, a lot of potential. Wasn't great last year. I saw like 80% of his accounted for touchdowns came against like all these. It was like Charlotte, Vandy, like just subpar teams, and in the big games he was terrible. Turnovers and touchdowns, that sort of thing. So I was like, if that's the same roster, but you bring in Josh Dobbs, an NFL quarterback, that team would be pretty nasty. I thought about maybe a Hendon Hooker or Joe Milton, but I think Josh Dobbs is probably the most likely choice there. We'll jump to number 9, Arizona State with Jaden Daniels. I know you and me both really believe in what Kenny Dillingham's doing at Arizona State. That's a phenomenal roster. They return a lot of players. I debated Jaden Daniels, so talented. I think he would ball out there, especially with Kenny Dillingham and what he was trying to do on offense. I think you could argue Clemson and T-Law probably deserve to go over that. Again, recency bias, think of how awesome Jaden Daniels was and beating my Lions in the playoffs probably led to them being 9. But we'll move on to 10 with Louisville and Lamar Jackson. I actually think Jeff Brom's a good coach. Louisville as a roster, probably the worst roster as a whole, top 10. Lamar would be so fun to watch. Like he was already unbelievable. Like single-handedly most fun player I had watched quite a while in college football. If you brought current day Lamar into college football, he's already unstoppable in the NFL. Like you kind of have to rely on the Ravens just getting up by so much, or are you like praying to get the ball to Derrick Henry, which is ridiculous to say. So I think he would put up 700 yards a game in college football.
This is what I like about this thought experiment, because I don't think anyone. Look, Jeff Brom, phenomenal coach. We've seen what Purdue's cratered into since leaving, and Louisville's a good roster, but I don't think anyone would have them necessarily top 10 with all these other NFL quarterbacks in our top 10, not in the AP top 10.
Yeah.
Man, Lamar just in a college offense.
That was the other.
What? You cut out.
I was also against ACC defenses too. Not even just like Pitt. Come on, he's gonna have he might have 1,000 yards if he tries.
Dude, that's the thing is I like what you have here. I'm gonna read off your 4 and 5 and 6. You have Oklahoma. Who do you have? Oklahoma at 6. Who's your quarterback? I see you've written 3 guys down.
Give me Baker.
Okay, I like Baker. I see Kyler was the easy choice, and Kyler is another one of those guys that probably would be unreal with just like Lamar with Louisville. But Baker is just the antics, everything. It would be so much fun seeing him back in the college game against SEC play. That would just be amazing. Number 5. Now this one, I think a lot of people are sleeping on. I don't think a lot of people talked about it. Yeah. And with the improvement in roster Texas Tech had made this past off season, with the transfer portal additions they've made, just how great the roster has become to become an already Big 12 contender. Now you add Patrick Mahomes. And one quick thing is Patrick Mahomes was a good college quarterback, but we know what he's become in the NFL. We're not taking their college side, and I know I mentioned Trevor Lawrence was a good college quarterback. We're not taking their college play. We're taking them literally tomorrow if the NFL vanished. Patrick Mahomes comes back to Texas Tech. What are we looking at?
He's throwing 1,000 yards a game in the Big 12, and I would watch every second of it.
I would. The second those tortillas fall on the field in Lubbock, in Texas, for Texas Tech.
Lubbock, yeah, you got it.
For a second I thought I didn't. All right, so then you got let's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have Texas Tech, Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee, ASU, and Louisville with their NFL quarterbacks. Number 4.
I'm rolling with the Crimson Tide. Jalen Hurts at number 4. Not much to be said. The top four you could probably argue in any order, and I would totally accept what you're saying. Great roster, great coaching staff. Jalen Hurts is phenomenal. It's just hard to argue. Their roster's a little bit lesser, I think, today than the top three. So given just how good some of the quarterbacks are for the top three, I'll jump into number three. I believe I had the Oregon Ducks with Justin Herbert. Similar thing as Alabama, phenomenal current roster. Dan Lanning, great coach, and I think Justin Herbert in that offense would also be borderline unstoppable. I mean, he was phenomenal in college with Oregon with a much lesser roster. He's been really good in the NFL. Broke a lot of rookie records. He's putting up big numbers. I think he would come into college and dominate, and that would be a team you would see roll. I think these top two are probably. I think everybody probably thought of these two originally. Ohio State with C.J. Stroud at number two. Not much to be said. Great roster, great coaching. They just won the national championship, and then they get to bring in, former rookie of the year, C.J. Stroud. And then number one, I think this would be the most unstoppable team in college history, Georgia with Matt Stafford. Again, the veteran mind. Like, I don't think there's a single defense, especially in the SEC, which is be the best defenses in the country. I don't think anything stopping Matt Stafford. That's a guy. He's going to throw for whatever you want. Like, I think the only time we were joking if he would throw an incompletion was if he tried playing a game lefty. I just tear any game, any team he played. Like, that would be unstoppable. That team too with him would just be, oh my goodness.
For the most
That's
part,
not a real thing because they would
exactly.
everyone.
So, quick recap. This is Jace's top 10 of the Jace top 10 of college NFL quarterbacks taking over their college team. We have Georgia with Stafford at 1, Ohio State with C.J. Stroud at 2, Oregon with Justin Herbert 3, Alabama with Jalen Hurts, Texas Tech with Mahomes at 5, then Baker in Oklahoma at 6, LSU Burrow at 7, Tennessee Josh Dobbs at 8. Jaden Daniels, I found it interesting that you call him you refer to him with ASU rather than LSU. So Jaden Daniels and ASU at 9, Louisville, Lamar Jackson at 10. Like I said, my only disagreement there would probably, I think order can be whatever. I would love to set up like a playoff bracket in general with this, but that can be for down the road. I think the only thing that I have an issue with is I would put Clemson in over definitely ASU and Louisville. I would consider putting them in over Tennessee. And then from there, we would have to really have a conversation. Texas Tech, I love that we put them in there. You put them in there. Dude, I would love to watch that happen. Like, the whole point of this.
Yeah, this would be really fun.
Like, there's a reason this is called, like, I called it my driving thoughts. This is like shower thoughts, too. Or, like, it's like just random crap that will never happen. But for us, it just becomes a fun, like, what if? So what if Texas A&M gets Johnny Manziel? What if actually no, he's not an active NFL quarterback. Oh, never mind.
This would be fun to like put into college football, create the quarterback and then throw him in a sim. I feel like that would be fun to see what happens. I'm sure someone's created that roster. You could probably go download it.
And then I'm sure there's legends rosters in college football 25. To me, it's if you expanded it and made it non-NFL active players. Obviously, Michigan with Brady will suddenly skyrocket up there. I think Florida, Tim Tebow, maybe. Like, at that point, you have to have a real conversation. Does Florida want to bring back Tim Tebow or DJ Lagway? Is he going to give them the best shot? Now, I think I should have mentioned this earlier, but so it's on me. The point of this exercise isn't you're building a program. Is I want to go win a national championship right now. And which one of the, because you're going to have 1 year with these NFL quarterbacks. Which one of these teams is going to be the best? For me, Georgia with Matt Stafford, unstoppable. Like you said, absolutely unstoppable. I almost wonder the argument for Oregon would. The funny thing is, we saw Bo Nix 2 years ago at Oregon. Justin Herbert is arguably better in almost every facet. I almost like Bo's mind of like being able to read defenses a little bit better. So like that argument exists, but I mean, could you imagine an Oregon offense with DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart, the offensive line they'll have, the running backs they just brought in, alongside with Justin Herbert and Will Stein? I think a lot of people forget Mario Cristobal led that program with Justin Herbert, but Justin Herbert had like 3 coordinators and 3 coaches in the 4 years he was at Oregon. And a lot of times with Cristobal and Marcus Arroyo, who was his main coordinator, it was a lot of clunkiness, and somehow he still had a good enough college career to go top 6 in the NFL draft. So for me, how great could Oregon be with
Plus, you got Herbert. What if scenario? Like, come on, he's gonna kill it.
exactly.
I was like, what if scenarios and Justin Herbert like are just he's undefeated. He's never like, what if. So I liked him for that pick. Also, that would be fun. Like Evan Stewart and Corey Moore go routes. Just how fast can you run 70 yards down the field? Because Justin was just gonna huck them deep. They could run that and probably score 150 points a game.
It's actually a great point. You don't need to have any refined routes. Just go.
You could not even need a tight end in that offense. You could just block, bring extra tackles on, block, send those 2 guys as far as they can go.
It's that meme of like, fuck it, someone's down there anyways. I think this is just a really interesting thought exercise as we continue to. We're going to try to add games like this in general, especially for the off season that we can talk about and like just the what ifs of college football. And we like to have a traditional college football show. We like to talk about the biggest topics, but we also want to have some fun doing it. We're, like we said at the top, we're fans. We're not journalists. We're not contracted out to talk about certain teams. We're not beat writers. We just want to talk about the sport. So I think, Jace, I'm going to wrap it up there. That's episode 1 of Flag for Discussion. I'm going to have to read this.
Woohoo, we did it.
Yeah, I know. Jace, we made it through our first pod. We're kind of officially podcast people now. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on our socials. We'll put those links below. I'll shout them out more in the future at the end of shows, but we just have to make sure they're all built and set up. We're gonna try to get as much content as we can out in the off season. We'll see how often we can record. This isn't our main job, but we would love to make it that way. We're just getting started, so please. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've listened this long, hi, Mom. And
bless your soul. Yeah. Thanks, friends.
Stick with us. We're only going to keep getting better. This has been Flag for Discussion.